Our final guest is Liz Crowe, a senior social worker at Paediatric Intensive Care in Brisbane, also author, also PhD scholar. How are you, Liz?
Good, thank you.
She has tissues.
They're for you.
So we're going to turn our attention now to sad stories. And one of the things that you really wanted to talk about was about loss and about grief. And for better or worse, we are sometimes participants in that journey with our patients and indeed professionally. And one of the things was, I think you've got a bit of a problem with the idea that there is such a thing as normal loss and grief.
So constantly people try to put in a box or compartmentalise or tell me what does normal grief look like. And I say, well, what does a normal human being look like? What colour are they? What shape are they? And it's the same with our grief experiences. And people, I love it when doctors in particular try to talk to me about Kubler-Ross, because while Elizabeth Kubler-Ross often, one of the first ever theories on grief and did enormous great things to bring grief to the fore, it would be like me getting up now and talking about an iron lung. It's dated.
It's old school.
And if you have ever had a grief experience yourself, I've never met anyone who's gotten to an acceptance stage where they think, gee, I'm glad that happened. I feel 100% grand about that now. Lots of people get to a stage where it becomes meaningful. And that's okay. And you still will have anger and denial and bargain with the universe, but you don't have to have those steps. Those steps are not an authoritative roadmap where you go, oh, I'm doing denial, and tomorrow I'm probably going to do anger for a little bit, and then I'll bargain, and lo and behold, I accept it. It just doesn't happen like that. And I think as health professionals, we need to be acutely aware not to tell people how they have to grieve. I strongly believe that Lindy Chamberlain went to jail after a dingo took her baby because she didn't grieve properly.
I didn't think that was going to come up, but since
you know what I mean? She didn't grieve properly. She never showed any level of emotion. And in a hospital, if you grieve too much, you see the social worker because you're depressed. If you don't grieve enough, you still see the social worker because you're in denial. And the beautiful Jill Hicks has given me permission to tell this story. Constantly people are saying, this is not normal. And I'm like, usually what brings people into an ICU is incredibly not normal. And so people's reactions fit the story. But Jill told me the most perfect story yesterday, where she was saying 3 months after her accident, she found out that they had found her legs and they were still preserved in the morgue, and she wanted to see them. And people were horrified, amazed, frightened for her to have that experience, and that she went in and viewed her legs and touched the calluses of her toes and almost had this enormous grief experience about saying, I will never have these legs again, after hating the shape of her thighs and all the rest of it. And don't you dare tell people how to grieve. I've had parents who need to go and sleep on their child's grave for night after night after night as they get used to the fact that their child doesn't need them physically anymore. That is normal grief, because it is the undoing of the most precious things in our life, and that's not normal.
So there's a couple of problems with this journey that you've highlighted the problems with, and one of them is that we need to get to acceptance. And I feel sometimes as health professionals, I think Laura said, we try and fix things. So somehow we've got to speed people through the denial, bargaining, acceptance, and get people over here. At the same time, we want to help people in this process. So what framework do we apply to that?
No framework. You get used to sitting in the rubble. That's what Judith Murray used to always say, someone who wrote a lot about grief. Sit in the rubble with people. We're not guiding them anywhere. We're staying with them and keeping them safe. And so when they need to explore for themselves, what does grief look like for me, then you sit with them. And as far as I'm concerned, if they're not hurting themselves and they're not hurting their others, then they are doing it in a really healthy way that makes sense to them.
So given our often inability to do that. How do you help other health professionals do what you've described? It sounds great concept, but some of us are really find it difficult to sit with.
Stop being such type A, got to control everything, Nancy tight asses. Just, God's sake.
You were looking at the audience then.
You know, you don't have to be in control of everything, and not every emotion needs a Broadway musical. Oh, I'm sad today. Dun, dun, I'm sad today. It means this. It just means you're sad. You are meant to have this range of emotions. That's completely normal. And so on the days where you feel sad, on the days where you have to dig deeper than normal to do your job, remember people like Jill Hicks. Remember her story. Seriously. She was on a train. We signed up for this, and what we do is meaningful. Stay connected to that. Stay connected to that passion. And don't get so overwhelmed by your emotions. I fell in a big hole last November, not literally, an emotional hole over something that happened at work. And I have had to claw my way back. I don't need to pathologise that. It was a horrendous event. Nothing like that will ever happen to me in my career again. And I don't need to say it was PTSD. I don't need to say it was burnout. It was just horrendous. And I'm clawing my way back. I didn't turn it into a Broadway musical, but if someone offers me a lot of cash, I will.
Well, I guess that does make us think about the stories and the storytelling, and also the connection that you and Jill share, I think, which is using humour. And sometimes when you tell stories, I remember the first time I met you, I was chairing a session at Smack Gold, and you told a story about swearing your way out of a crisis. And it kind of went on this precipice the whole time where I was falling off my chair, but I thought, this could go wrong. How do you manage that? Because sometimes if you tell a funny story and make lighthearted of seemingly serious things, it might offend people.
Yeah, that's a possibility. One I'm willing to take. Look, I think there is a real skill to it. You don't just go in and like, wah, 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 red honky nose and wish for the best. I think you have to know your audience. If you're not sure, err on the side of caution, don't share the joke. I have a very sick sense of humour. These days I'm very careful where I say that, because I actually got in a lot of trouble for that smack talk. A lot of trouble. So I think, look, humour has this beautiful way of psychologically resetting us in the moment. And I think for anyone who works in critical care, there are moments where humanity is literally bashing us in the face. And we have to keep a professional persona. And humour for me is a way of just going, we're okay, let's reset, let's keep doing what's important here. It does go wrong at times. And when it does, apologise very quickly. I think the other thing that has become very apparent to me that humour has a very strong cultural basis to it. So things that in particular the Irish and the Australians find and New Zealanders find funny, lots of the world doesn't. And you can easily offend people. I was saying in February, I gave a talk in America and the audience was laughing and I got a bit loosey-goosey on stage and wasn't perhaps using my filter as well as I should have. And I said, when you're constructing a well-being plan, it's not enough to go for a run, have a drink and go outside and light up a fag, which in different parts of the world means different things. I had 1,000 cardiologists brace themselves. And I'm like, a cigarette, people. I'm talking about cigarettes. So when you do make a big faux pas, which I regularly do on stage, you just apologise quickly and get the language barrier thing back under control. Keep going.
Sounds good. Well, I personally am pleased to be joined by someone with an Australian accent up here. But Simon, I imagine again there's one or two things that people have got to say on Twitter?
Yeah, absolutely. People love the way that you talk and the way that you tell it how it really is. I think sometimes when you hear smack talks, there's a phrase which people will pick up on which really encapsulates what you're saying here, and it's just flying down a stream like the Matrix, and that's sit in the rubble with them. Yeah. That's really sort of captured the people in the audience. And I think that really means something, because it's with, it's not to. And I think that's what people are saying here, and I think that
And Jill said it repeatedly, hold my hand. That was the most powerful thing out of all the interventions. That's the same thing that has stayed. And it's why I usually wear pants to work, because I'm literally sitting on the floor a lot with people. I'm not trying to fix it. I'm not trying to say something magical. There are no words that are going to heal, except for sometimes in resuscitation situations or after a child has just died. I will sometimes say when people are really wailing, we're keeping you safe. You are not alone. We're keeping you safe. You're not alone. I will sometimes say that because people talk about having this surreal moment of not feeling like they're still in the room, and I'm just trying to ground them. And I spoke about this yesterday as well. This touch is the antidote to cortisol. It spreads oxytocin. So if your colleagues or if someone that you're working with, you can see that they're hugely distressed, heightened, it's a very simple gesture. See, little shoulder rub goes a long way. Keep it here, though. Just.
So we've talked a little bit about loss and grief, particularly with respect to our patients, but obviously there's many in this audience who've been kind enough to share their own stories of loss and grief, and they've had powerful messages as well. And Laura sort of has illustrated some of the dysfunctional ways we can deal with each other. I know that you were very instrumental in helping people deal with John Hines' death, and I know that you also have helped men in the audience. Do you have the same approach, or are some things different?
No, I just think people are people. And I think we have to acknowledge that we hold a lot of loss and grief for people, a lot of trauma. And we need to reflect about the ways we work through that, the ways we make meaning, because we're not passive observers on a bus. We're right there in it and amongst it. And we have to keep in mind all the time, why are we there? What's important about being there? What would the experience be like for this family, these people, if you weren't there today? You know, what if someone hadn't have gone and got Jill Hicks out and we'd never had the huge honour of meeting her today? How different our lives would be. And so when you feel sad, I think have an enormous curiosity about that. Because, you know, you can see people die or see people suffer, and then you meet someone and they really touch you. And instead of going, what's wrong with me? Like, why have I got all this transference? Need to see a therapist. Instead of doing that, be curious. Like, why this person? Why did this person connect with me so powerfully? Is it because they remind me of someone? Is it because of something that they said? Is it because they touched me? You know, like, whatever it is, just be curious about it. And then if you do get stuck and you need to talk to someone else about it, then go and do that with pride. I am looking after myself because I have a commitment to look after patients indefinitely. Nothing shameful about that.
All right, well, I feel like we've taken quite a journey, Simon, through liver envies, finding legs in the morgue. It seems like no topic has been off bounds here. But
can I just say one thing? Can we not call grief a journey or a cancer journey? I've got a friend who just got cancer and she got a lifeboat, thing and said, I don't want to go on this journey. I thought that was pretty funny. It's just an experience, because at the journey, like a journey means often that you're getting somewhere good, and sometimes you don't. Sorry, I'm just going to... Sorry to interrupt, Vic. I'm sure you're saying something very powerful. Keep going.
I was actually trying to sum up.
Oh, we have to go somewhere else?
Yes, which does imply a journey, actually, just to be clear.
I journeyed a lot to the toilet this morning, personally.
It's the journey to the coffee. They've been here for 2 hours.
Sorry.
I do want to thank our guests today, because I do think our patient stories are powerful. I think our peer stories are powerful. And I think to think about how we hear those stories and how we tell those stories really does make a difference when we're trying to add that art to the science of what we do. And I would like to just take a moment for everyone to again thank our guests for the morning.